Welcome everyone to Advancing Analytics at Finance Teams, Stories of Success. The webinar is about to begin now. I have with me Craig Terrell from Standard Chartered Bank and Tiago Pereira from Mercedes-Benz. I myself, John McCambridge, will be moderating the discussion that we have here. As you saw from the previous slide, we'll be looking into the reality of finance teams, talking about real-world methods of achieving success. We'll talk about how analytics, AI, machine learning are interconnected and related in that space and how folks are able to succeed. I'll turn it over first to Craig to introduce themselves, then Tiago, and then from there we'll begin the discussion. So Craig, take it away.
Thanks, John. So my name is Craig Terrell. I've been working in this area of analytical finance with Dataiku for the last nearly 5 years. And we've been through a journey from overcoming what was a volume problem into really now stretching to scale and how we really achieve high value from what we're doing today. So, it's certainly been an exciting journey and very excited to talk about it.
Excellent. Tiago?
Well, thanks as well. So my name is Tiago Pereira. I'm a data scientist within the cost controlling department of Mercedes. And as Craig, we also started our journey with Dataiku. I work in a digital transformation team. So our goal is to get rid of a lot of Excels, a lot of PowerPoints, and use more appropriate tools. And Dataiku is one tool we use with that to implement a lot of ETL flows and just automate a lot of processes that have been currently manual in our department.
Excellent. So Tiago, I think that's an excellent place for us to begin some of the conversation here. And as we go through this conversation, just to let everybody know in the audience, feel free to ask questions in the chat. So Tiago, you were saying there around Excel, of course, which is important to bring up, and more generally, the kind of efficiencies and work that can be done there. So let's start with a broad question here for us both. Tiago, you start around key challenges when it comes to analytics process efficiency. And I think the way we often see that from our side is the idea of responsiveness and agility, along with this idea of something that's robust and not brittle. So talk to us a little bit about that challenge and how your team is approaching it.
So speaking of robust and brittle, especially brittle, in the finance department, Excel is often used, and Excel can do a lot of things, and it can do a lot of things quite well. But over time, those Excel files, especially with macros, have become really, really big and really problematic to use. And also, transparency is often lost when having these big Excels with big macros who do fairly standard calculations. So this is where we then started to use Dataiku. So we were able to upload a lot of data files, and we were able to transform them. We were able to prepare them in a very standardized and clear and transparent way. And then at the end, we didn't have this huge file. We had a clear, distinct view of what our processes were. And at the end, we were able to then use the output generated in Dataiku either to then use classic business intelligence using visualization tools like Power BI, for example. And we were able to follow the starting point, the data, clearly to the endpoint, for example, then the visualization tool, without having a brittle Excel file crashing once you trigger the wrong macro or once somebody deleted a certain formula.
So Tiago, I think that's very helpful in terms of a very clear-cut description of an actual process, right? Which is one of the important things. You need to make sure that the individual processes are functioning well from start to finish. Craig, I'd be keen to hear from your side some detail. In particular, I think there's also maybe a mindset or a perspective approach that you might also want to weigh in on here.
Yeah, I think that it's a very interesting journey, the Excel one. We're still doing it. I mean, clearly a whole range of things we do, both in standard processes within finance, whether it be in the cost, balance sheet, or income area. We are bringing those kind of desktop processes to the digitization world. And you're a bit stuck. Your personal mindset is let's engineer the problem. So you go through trying to optimize it. Don't follow the limitation of the spreadsheet. I mean, sometimes we've got today where I have a spreadsheet where they pivot the data. And so we end up with 400 columns of information with it's this year by RFX by actuals and a separate column for it, because what they're trying to do is fit the data into Excel. So they're trying to get to like 500,000 records, because if you depivoted it, you're at millions or billions. So part of the problem with early kind of straight from Excel digitization we found is the culture of the engineer saying, I could do this a lot better. I can build databases, give it to me and I'll go make some magic out of this thing. And the person who owns that spreadsheet, well, you're really trying to make that transformation jump to say, look, I don't understand what you're doing. So we found, we've had successes and failures. Failures where we tried to do a full step digitization. It was 400 steps in this spreadsheet, like across like 20 spreadsheets, 400 to 500 steps, thousands and thousands of procedures and rules. And the answer was, even the people who wrote it don't even understand. The answer turned out something different, and they go, I don't know where it would have gone wrong. So Excel lift and shifting without optimization is dangerous, and we have some very dangerous pipelines today where a transformation step on aggregation around 3 sets of data, so the corporate plan, the service charges, and the actuals, goes through 120 steps apiece with all of the business rules, all of the hierarchies. So you can create the same brittleness in enterprise software because it's the process that's brittle, but it's the mindset. It's trying to get this contradiction between the mindset of the engineering areas trying to do transformational type things on that information versus people who have to, make that digital leap. Yeah. And part of that is around, which is the good parts of it, is look, they're on the same platform, so literally they can see what we're doing. Second good is, look, we're not coding. We really, really, really stay away from any type of coding until we're through the early digitization process. So at least it's in formula language. And I think the last piece around it is, there is excellent material around that kind of Excel to IQ skill leap, where we're seeing that really helping us take someone who knows the Excel and they're literally reading those guidebooks that were really done well by the academies in IQ that says, look, this is the function over here and this is the function over here. And I think, look, brittleness is part of that digitization.
Exactly, and that's the point I was keen to emphasize there, that you can make a process which is inherently brittle and in particular difficult to perceive, not transparent, hard to understand. You can make that very robust in terms of it won't technically break. It will do exactly the thing you've made it do every time. It won't fall over because somebody's Excel crashed. That doesn't necessarily mean you've solved your problem. You've removed one of the variables, but you haven't necessarily created something that you can understand, that you can work with in a responsive manner, or that you get the correct answers from. And indeed, we do see that problem of a lift and shift in which an opportunity to reimagine is lost, and a lot of ineffective ways of working, which were appropriate given the tooling available, right? Like these people are quite good at optimizing Excel use to the maximum level, but that skill set and that approach isn't often appropriate when you are moving into more of a data pipelining mindset or citizen data science mindset.
It's really interesting. I mean, I think I had to tell you what you think around. It's kind of, it's not modeling explainability, but it becomes process explainability and those interim steps you have to go through to say, right, I'm here in the process. Let me show you now how I got there, so some lineage steps of the calculation, and what the result is now. So let's all agree at this, either you're using zones or you're using zones with dashboards, but some way of breaking down those processes. So it's explainability, and it is the same problem whether we're explaining what a model did to what a process did. I mean, to a user, sometimes it's black box. I don't know what your experience has been, Tiago.
Yeah, Tiago, I'd be keen to hear your thoughts on this.
So I agree with everything Craig said. We tried to solve this when we started project. So we try to avoid lift and shifts, right? The reason is not only that the software was outdated, but also the processes were outdated. As Craig's example showed, there are much easier ways to do some of these transformations, and some of them are just they're in there and nobody knows why they are in this Excel files. They just survived maybe decades of not updating them. So what we always try to do, and we do not only have the data engineers, the data scientists within our team who know the IT part, to know how to do these transformations, either with Dataiku or with other softwares. We also have someone who can talk with the IT nerds like me, and with the business side. So basically, they are trying to tell them, hey, what you do in Excel right there might be inefficient, or we can do it in a little bit different way in Dataiku. And then this translator basically talks to me in a sense that I know what I have to do from the IT side, that I also have the freedom to do these transformations, and that I can then, or that we as a team then can show the business side, hey, we have gotten rid of maybe some of your steps, but the end product, what you want to have, is the same, and we've made it faster. So that's also one of my recommendations. Do not lift and shift processes, because
and I think finding those people, Tiago, who can bridge that conversation, they can be difficult to find. They're very valuable when you have them. And ideally, you're able to create processes that are transparent enough and can be dove into by people who are not necessarily able to make that bridging, but are on one side or the other, and they can nonetheless understand what's on that other side. And that can be that's a great way to improve the scalability of that approach. So given we have a relatively small amount of time, I think we could talk on this for quite some time, but I want to make sure that we introduce another, I think, major component in here, which would be the concepts of machine learning and AI in this space. I think up until now, everything we've talked about, it might involve machine learning or AI, or it might not. In many cases, it won't. And there's huge value to be gained simply from what we were already discussing. But now let's discuss this idea of machine learning and AI in this space. So obviously, machine learning is being adopted by finance teams, by FP&A teams, and so on. But I think there are significant challenges, and I think there's also some discussion about what's the appropriate pace and what are the areas that are obviously effective and other areas where it's not so clear. So Tiago, I'd like to get from you an initial perspective on this use of machine learning in the finance space. And kind of what's your kind of principles maybe there, and what are you seeing working? And then Craig would be keen to hear your perspective.
So the first issue we always account is that everybody wants to do AI. Everybody wants to do it. It's awesome. But few people especially know how to implement it, especially if the foundation we just talked earlier is not set. You cannot implement any type of machine learning or AI tool if the data pipelines are not built, the foundation of the databases are not set. So this was our first challenge, to overcome that. And once we had the data in place, we really started simple. It is the easiest thing to start with the simple model in our approaches. For example, we were doing forecasting and we wanted to get a prototype out fast. So we started with simple models like univariate forecasting models, sometimes even linear regression, such that we were able to show the business side our first prototype and show, hey, look, what you've been doing manually a lot of the time, we can do within seconds. And then they were like, oh, this looks really cool. Can we advance it? And then we opened the door to introduce machine learning, to introduce these new concepts. And also, it's always a mindset change here, because especially when people were using Excel and now you're introducing new software tools like Dataiku, and then on top of that, you're introducing machine learning, keep them engaged in the process so that they do not see AI as a competitor, but as a tool to then enhance their processes such that they are now able to do what they've been doing probably in days or weeks, now within minutes or hours. And
I
that
like
is
this a lot,
we
Tiago. Yeah, this idea of a spectrum, or the idea that, machine learning, AI are along that spectrum, and that you take incremental steps along it. It's not some dramatic new world. It is and as you say, you move your way there in a sensible manner. The whole point is to show results at each step. So Craig, I'd love to get your take on it.
Yeah, it's been an interesting way. I mean, I think, AI began with us producing more information than people could actually even imagine. So we started to create, they asked us for all the data and we gave it to them. And they couldn't interpret it. They didn't actually know what it meant. And so we realized very quickly the only way to support them was this kind of augmented intelligence. So the human is going to need help to understand what they're seeing, especially with very, very, very large data sets. So we started with, how do we help them? Like, is the number going up or down? Very simply. And you have to look at seasonality, all sorts of things. The machine would see those patterns and go on, even though you're looking at month over month and year over year and YTD numbers, the number is going down. And it's knowing, the machine knows that. So we just said, like, start with direction. Is it up, is it down, or is it flat? Don't just look at the kind of core performance kind of average numbers we would have done, like month over month versus budget, YTD, on that kind of stuff. So that was the first part, is give them a simple indicator, which was right. So don't even try to guess how big the number would be moving. Just agree what the direction of the number is. And that was very, very helpful, at least to know, look, my head count's going down. I go, great, I can bank that. Yes, but we understand you've got open JRs, your cost point is going up, so your numbers are going up. You just haven't seen it yet. It depends on this factor. So that was our first attempts at it. If we swing forward to where we are today, clearly there's been this huge interest in content generated by machines, the generative AI. And the reason buying is because to make decisions off financial numbers, you tell stories. Even though we create lots and lots of numbers, if you look at the core of finance, it's generally decisions are made of the stories, whether they be in ALCOs, the GALCOs of the world, our ICAR kind of cost, and we have to tell stories. And that's where generative AI is really, really changing the game, because it tells a story. It starts with words. And if you understand brain chemistry, brains remember not the numbers. They'll never remember the numbers. They always remember the story. And people make decisions of stories, even if with not precise numbers. So I think if you swing forward today, there's a great emphasis now on how can we accelerate the journey to everyday AI, and where can it help? But clearly with a regulated industry and things, how can we do that in a responsible way, mostly around where do we do that processing? Who has access to that information where we do it? What residual footprint do we put out in the internet? And as a bank, how do we gain the access and values of things like GPT-3 for large language models, but do it with inside the internal bank, with the internal intelligence? So look, we came from quite an unusual background. And I think now is really, we're unlocking use cases almost every single day because of this. It's kind of more pull from the business of, tell me how you could start to do this kind of work, but protecting ourselves in this different direction. So yeah, directionally very interesting at the moment. Really, really game changing.
Yeah, so I think this is an excellent point. Again, if we talk about this spectrum, this incremental work, we can introduce what would have a few years ago been seen as what AI and machine learning means. You're introducing some complex modeling, maybe using it for clustering, maybe using decision trees and so on, that would have been seen as like, oh, that's your AI or ML. And now, of course, generative AI and these large language models are very much now what is considered at the forefront of this spectrum. So I think Craig's introduced this idea of the storytelling element and how valuable that is. Tiago, I'd be keen from your perspective, what are the obvious wins at the moment from this generative AI large language model opportunity?
So I'm a little bit more conservative on those gains. I think now we're in the gold rush phase of generative AI, where we find gold nuggets everywhere lying around, and we are harvesting these low-hanging fruits where we can now use generative AI to get code snippets of a code language we never wrote in within seconds and start it very easily. We can summarize tons of documents within seconds. So I think these nuggets we find now in the next couple of years, we still are able to get them. But then the challenge arises for basically every company. The same with deep learning is these models have to be fed, and they have to be fed with large amounts of data. And if the foundation for that is not set, and companies have not set up the systems to feed these models on especially internal data, this is where the real gains are coming from, then generative AI will just be another buzzword no one is able to use. So I'm very interested to see which companies in the next few years have learned from the challenges of deep learning or introducing deep learning in ML, and have set up their systems in a way that you can now use large language models. Because I think, as Craig said as well, you are now able to answer a lot of the questions. And this is where the real fun starts, right? Now you have access to the internet, you have access to maybe someday internal information, and these multinational corporations have so many information they might not even be aware of because they're so huge. And using then large language models to answer problems or to solve problems, that's going to be really enticing. But at the same time, again, I said, I'm going to be a little bit conservative of that part.
So Tiago, I think you're absolutely right there. And I think the conservatism is not an unreasonable thing in this space. I'd be curious, especially as we're coming to the end of our conversation here, what I'd like to close out on is this idea of, as you just introduced, looking forward a couple of years, 2-3 years from now. So Tiago, could you say quickly from your side, what would you see? Again, you're saying that there's kind of some groundwork that needs to be done and so on, and some companies will succeed better than others. I agree with you there. Let's say we're 2-3 years from now, what do you think the main thing will be different in this, in the finance space? What do you think will be the most substantial difference, and what do you think will result in some companies getting there faster than others?
So I think the storytelling part Craig has mentioned. Now we're able to tell stories. I assume if we are able to feed those models with our data and with our also information that we have about our business, then we are able to tell stories or maybe even get new insights out of our own information. That would be really curious to see. If every company, for example, now has their own version of ChatGPT to help build those stories, to help gain insights of their own processes. So once we are there, I think that'd be really cool, but I don't think 2 years will be suffice to
Absolutely. Yeah, I think especially it'll depend on the company for sure. So Craig, if maybe let's close out on the exact same question there. 2-3 years from now, where would you see as the biggest shift within the finance space?
I think it's in four ways. I think the first one is, if you look at describing our financial position in detail, I think we would be highly personalized, and that we know what people need to look at, and we are presenting people a concise view of the facts, and everyone shares the same fact. Yeah, I think we are much better at explaining both the behavioral effects of the organization in its decisions, as well as the market, in terms of why those numbers are the numbers. So whether it be corporate plan strategy or some decision or outcome of happen in the market that explains why are we getting the financial performance we want. I think we will see an ongoing evolution of the use of machine intelligence in creating a defender position and say, look, if you don't change your strategy, then this is where you're going to be. Now, you may decide not to take that, but prediction based on the momentum and the patterns would mean we would end up here. And then finally, GPT saying, presenting an opinion and saying, look, I would recommend you go do this. So I think it will change every part of the spectrum, from what numbers we look at to the finally how machines are going to help us make those types of decisions. And it will be really everywhere and part of the standard toolkits. As we started this conversation, Excel is today, we're going to see most of what we do with some degree of augmented intelligence helping us do what we need to do.
Indeed. And I think, again, that goes back to the broader point that I think is coming through here clearly, which is this idea that these are all along a spectrum of incremental work, that you can incorporate these technologies in at your pace. Some will go faster than others, and that it is a supplement, an addendum, or in some cases a transformation for every part of your process potentially. Excellent. So thank you both so much for the time on that. I think that was an excellent looking forward point to close out on. Thank you all so much.